I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next, the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I am talking with one half of Richmond, Virginia noise rock four-piece, Dumbwaiter, who, with their latest record, Change, which comes out this Friday, have performed one of the most interesting musical transformations that I can think of in modern rock music, going from about 13, 14 years of being a avant-garde, jazzy, John Zorn, King Crimson, Mr. Bungle, Primus adjacent, instrumental metallic rock band to a streamlined, grim, dark, post-punky, no-wavy rock band with the spirit of Chat Pile and Michael Gira from about 1984. And I don't know if that description really quite fits or makes sense, but have a listen to the latest record, see what you think. Blast beats, really kind of dreary stomps, squealing saxophones, some very dark, pained lyrics, just generally a whole atmosphere of deep, deep anxiety. So yeah, not music to listen to if you want something soothing, but if you want something dark and menacing, this is a very, very cool record. And so I'm talking with the band's Nick Crider and Keith Paul, guitarist, vocalist, and bassist vocalist, respectively, about this transformation, about the latest record, about their past music, and such things. You can check out the band on Instagram and Facebook. You can check out what's been released so far from the album on Bandcamp, with, as I say, the full album coming out on Friday. It's going to be available on vinyl and cassette, as well as digitally. You can follow me at Tom Osman Sounds. You can go to my website, tomosmansounds.com, for my music. You can check me out on Ampwall and Bandcamp. And, oh yeah, check out my column for New Noise magazine, Mapping the Underground, where I continue these kinds of conversations with underground artists and people working in the DIY music world, with more cool features to come. In fact, features that I need to write. But anyway, that's another task after this one. So for now, Nick Crider and Keith Paul of Dumbwaiter. Take it away.
I don't like change. Please don't change on me. Let's just stay the same. Movement doesn't come easily.
Keith, hello.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
A pleasure. Thanks for joining me. Keith, I see something in the background. I guess this is a bass guitar, and I guess that this is probably not your only bass guitar.
That is a bass. Yeah, I'm in a room that I use basically for practicing at home. Soon to be my son's bedroom. I'm about to have to get everything out of here for him, but that's one of two basses. That bass is built by Kevin Bernstein, the engineer that actually recorded our most recent record, Change. He builds aluminum necked instruments on his free time when he isn't recording bands.
Aha. And talking of Kevin Bernstein, so you've been working with him since Tusk, is that right? Since the 2020 album?
That's correct, yep.
So this is your first, this is your third record with him, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, I've done a bunch of different projects with him. It's the third with Dumbwaiter for sure. Keith and I have been there for another project too.
So what's the sort of foundation of the enduring working relationship with him?
Nick would probably be better to answer that, but I would say comfort.
His workflow is immaculate, and it's really exciting to have things shape up so quickly, and it makes it so that you can work with the material as you're going, as opposed to some of the people we worked with in the past. Well, I don't want to speak too poorly, but the workflow is a big deal for me. And he's just like Kevin being Kevin. Like, I really appreciate his humor, and we kind of understand things. There's moments where we just can do the look at each other moment and be like, that wasn't right, and understand it without saying anything.
So you've already touched on the fact that the forthcoming album is Change, and I understand from reading the press release that there's a very specific reason for the name. And it was very interesting for me. I've gone back and I've listened to some of all of your albums. So I don't know all of the material, but I have a kind of a sense of the tone and the style. And it's clear that I would say it's not just the case that you've got the change of having vocals, but it seems like the style has there have been changes, quite significant changes to the style on this record. So tell me about the decision of feeling like you wanted to and needed to have the change for this new record.
I'd say it's on a couple different levels of needing to do something different and tonally changing and structurally changing, and then just personally feeling like there was stuff to say now, and just adding vocals was a huge change. Yeah, I think it was just all around, like almost to the point for me where I was like, do we keep calling ourselves Dumbwaiter? But ultimately decided to just stick with it and make it a kind of like a pretty interesting narrative to go from, spastic, ADD, mathy music, world music sometimes, to switch to something that's a little bit more focused.
And was like, how harmonious was that for everyone in the band, that decision of wanting to do something different and the way that that change was going to materialize in your music?
I think everybody wanted to do it, but how it materialized was pretty painful. I think Keith can probably talk about that too.
Oh yeah, sure. Following the last record, Ghost Gists, we started working on a what would have been the next record, and it was pretty much just continuing along the same path of what we were already doing. We had basically trashed almost an album's worth of material. It was really frustrating to put that much work and then, but to be able to come to terms with throwing it away and starting from scratch. Yeah, people were tearing their hair out their heads, banging their heads
If I
along
could,
the wall.
if I could accentuate that, I think the biggest learning curve was everybody bringing all this really good material into the room, and for everybody to learn to let go of things, like getting rid of perfectly good things because it didn't serve the album, was a huge thing to get over. And it's definitely hard to work, really hard on something, show it to everybody, work on it, and then say, you know what, this is good, but it can't stick around.
Yeah, I would agree that a lot of the riffs, a lot of the music we were writing, wasn't serving any sort of structure that would allow for vocals to really shine. It was too busy. We really needed to dial everything down and do a lot less.
And do you remember what the track was where you went, right, okay, like this is what the new sound and the new direction is? Or like the first track where you went, okay, this is what I can envisage vocals going on to?
That first track was the a track that we were on for like a year or so, and I think that was the one where we were determined to make vocals work, and it kind of laid the structure for the rest of the album. And even then, we cut 40 seconds of the end of the song towards the end of the recording process. But that was definitely finding the voice through there, and I think almost sequentially you can see it getting further and further realized. We did a lot of editing and going back and editing, but it was almost sequentially written.
Okay. So you started with The Sun.
Mhm.
Well, that's because I was going to ask you as well if you had much trouble figuring out the track listing of the record, because I think it has a really good flow to it. It's very dynamic. Like I think you've got quite a lot, I would say, of the blast beats parts come quite early on. And then there are a lot of different tones and rhythms and tempos. And the blast beats, I feel like, kind of come back towards the end. It has like a very cool arc to it. So yeah, so I guess you've already answered that question. You were creating it in sequence as you went.
It was intuitive, and also we were very conscious of juxtaposing every single thing. So at the end of this track, it's like, what's the next thing that we have available that contrasts that the most? And that formula kind of helps with dynamic for sure. That and patience, but
Yeah.
Yeah, when we finished recording Change, and everything was done, it was, what do you call it? It was mixed, and we were getting the tracks back, and basically the band had a discussion for about a week or so about how the track order should go. Um, and then inevitably, after arguing back and forth with each other, we realized that it should just be the way it was recorded, and so we didn't change a thing. It was what you hear on the record is exactly what went down in the studio from start to end. Um, we didn't move anything around. It just felt perfect as it was.
Yeah. And so you've talked about the sort of painful and time-consuming process of coming up with material which you then decided wasn't going to serve what the band was going to be at this point. What about the process that you had where initially you thought you'd bring in a different singer? What was that process like of first investing that time and then getting to the point where you went, actually, we're going to do this ourselves?
we tried out a handful of people, and I don't think anybody was wrong, but I think that we started the process too early. We didn't understand. I think there needed to be enough patience. The reason why it worked for us is because we were patient enough for ourselves to like mangle it and keep mangling it and keep wrestling with it. Whereas we weren't ready, and nor did we feel comfortable making someone sit in a room while we figured out how to be a band. Um, I think that's a big part of it. And then also, it's just like logistically adding a fifth voice in. I was like, we're already trying to reduce the voices that are there, and I was worried about adding another one on top of there while simultaneously trying to like battle for space. Whereas four, it's easier to get that space separated some.
And
I remember. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, no, please
I
go ahead.
remember Nick had, after we had tried out a few people in the room. Nick had sort of pitched the idea. What if we did it ourselves? And then that was a whole other, coming to terms with, well, what do we actually sound like? And I didn't want it to be sounding like we were trying to be someone different or someone that we enjoy listening to. I wanted it to be genuine, and that was a big concern. I think in the end we succeeded in being ourselves, and we sound like ourselves. And then it was basically who was going to step up to the plate and actually get on the microphone first. I think it was Nick, which I thought was funny. Nick is the quietest person in our band in a public setting, so to see him get up on the mic first was mind blowing. Um,
And then, so in terms of the contributions of the different members on the record, like I would say the main track I noticed like really distinctly different sounding vocals was Memory, I would say, because you got this kind of like despondent sounding vocals that go through most of it, and then there are these gruff shouts for that one. So I was curious first of all about who's doing what on that, but in general through the rest of the record, what's the kind of makeup of the vocals between the four of you?
I'm probably like maybe 70% of it, 60% of it, and then everybody else has their room. It was just like we wanted it to be eclectic, but at the same time have like a pretty unifying voice. So everybody kind of picked their one or two tones and kind of stuck with it.
yeah, the gruffer, more yelling vocals on that track "Memory" that you brought up, that's me. And the rest is mostly Nick. Nathaniel kind of does some gang vocals towards the end on that one.
He does a
Uh,
lot of like coming in and doing backup and like trying to harmonize and stuff.
mhm, mhm. That was the song where I had written my lyrics independently of. I wasn't aware of anything that Nick was doing, and that was another concern: was how are we going to bridge these? We have three different, sometimes four different members doing vocals, and how are they going to tie in and be cohesive? And we got lucky, I feel like, on that track where the lyric I had written kind of fit the vibe and the subject matter. Uh, we just got lucky with that one.
And that decision to have singing and to have vocals, how much of that was from a sense that you wanted to express something lyrically and verbally versus you wanting to have like vocals as an instrument on the record?
I felt like I knew what I wanted tonally, and it was a lot about trying to find a way to be open enough to feel exposed. And I think personally, it's me getting out of a lot of stuff in my life and personal stuff. It's like that my process is kind of like a loose, intuitive writing style, but then you kind of hone in on why you are writing these things, and then you accentuate that. And a lot of the times, just like getting older and going through more and more things, I just had, and just the current state of the world just kind of oozes out of you, even if you're not intentionally doing that. But yeah.
Yeah, what kind of well, I suppose one way to phrase the question is, do you think that you would have all reached this point if it hadn't been for the pandemic?
I think so. Um, I think it would have happened. I think this was kind of leading up to this point, regardless of the pandemic. Um,
I
we
think
felt like we were just repeating ourselves.
it fast forwarded it though, because we were all sitting at home writing 10 million ideas. So like that felt like Ghost just felt like it was the culmination of what we could do, which I agree with Keith, but I feel like it might have taken another album or two had it not been for that everybody write your heart out time.
Was the last record, and as I say, I'm asking this from having only listened to parts of each record, but the last record was the first one where I noticed blast beats. Had you used blast beats on earlier records?
Not to my knowledge. If there were any blast beats in previous records, they might have been little spurts of just very quick, nothing that continues on. So you're right. I think it was "Climbing Up a Broken Ladder" was the first song where we were blatantly like we do blast beats, and oddly, that another thing about that song was that was the first song in our discography where it was a bass line that never shifted, it never changes. It's just a bass line from start to finish, and that had never been done. And I found it interesting that people responded to that song more than the rest of the songs on that record. So we saw that maybe doing less was something we should pursue, and our drummer loves doing blast beats, so we felt we could pursue that some more as well.
Well, while we're on blast beats, I would love to. The blast beats are probably my favorite, one of my favorite things about this album, and the fact that he doesn't do very many drum rolls or anything, and they're pretty straightforward. But I think that my favorite thing was discovering that if everybody stuck with a tone and like worked within like doesn't have to be a whole note, but theoretically a whole note over top of the drums, it can make those drums shine more and more. And I remember Kevin coming in with a microphone on the hi-hats and being like, you know, these blasts are going to sound really great. And I was like, yes, yes. And everything from that point, like musically, maybe not the lyrics, but everything else being simpler, just really helped those come through. And I just love blast beats. So.
Yeah, I think they're employed really nicely because it never feels like it's just a barrage of blast beats for the sake of intensity. Like it feels like they're serving a purpose in the songs and in the overall structure. I also wanted to say as well that I do really like the way that the hi-hat sounds. And you know, I am like a sucker for a nice bit of hi-hat playing in music. So I think that's also done really well.
Kevin.
Yeah, and to that, what do you call it? I believe uh, Nathaniel had inherited a set of like what do you call it, Zildjian K hi hats, and I remember kind of like, oh, you should use those in the studio. Those are really nice. And but Nathaniel did what he does, and he's like, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and I'm glad he did. That's great. He used not the hi hats that I wanted, so I'm glad you say that.
Also, if you can't tell, he's been in a handful of power violence and grindcore bands.
Okay, well, that definitely gives you the training for that kind of playing.
Yeah.
And thinking about the kind of like the background of your sound, because when I went back and I listened to your earlier records, I think one of the first things that I thought when I listened to tracks from the first one, which was, it's got a question in the title, right? Is this chocolate? I think
Mhm.
the first thing that I thought of was Mr. Bungle, and then I thought of King Crimson. Have they been relevant reference points for the band?
I will say I can't speak. I cannot speak for everyone. Mr. Bungle, I knew of them. I was absolutely familiar, and but I wasn't drawing from them personally on that record. Um, but I think our drummer, maybe Nick, can answer for himself. But I think they were, into the Bungle.
King Crimson is one of Tristan's favorites, the saxophone player's favorites bands, and Mr. Bungle. I loved them intensely for a long time, and I think I played them out. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't think I could listen to them anymore. I've listened to them too much, and I also think that's part of that's coming from having that be so much of an influence for me that I like try to do some of it, and now I'm just like, I tried to do it. I've listened to it a million times. I've got to move on. But
Yeah.
forever respect for Mr. Bungle and King Crimson. King Crimson's definitely saxophone for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't like the Mr. Bungle reference points I didn't hear so often, but it was, I suppose it was partly the having the sax, feeling there's like a very jazzy aspect, and then also having the hard, like almost metallic kind of elements. I thought like, yeah, that reminds me of Bungle a bit. I did also find as well, and probably Keith, this is something that you can again speak about. I did find at times that I thought of Primus. You had points, not particularly with the first album necessarily. Where was it? I think it was with Darn off Heck, and also with
Sure.
Greedy as Fuck from Cancel
Yeah.
Christmas. There's like this kind of
Oh yeah,
stutter that I
yeah.
thought like, that reminds you a bit of Primus, and some of the very nimble
Yeah.
bass work as well, I thought.
Sure, sure. Guilty as charged on that one. I grew up listening to so much Primus, so it would spill. Of course, it would spill over into the stuff I do. But the funny thing is, I'm not a very good bass player. I cannot even begin to get close to any of the stuff that Les Claypool can do. And it's
He's real
funny, we've
good.
we've had yeah, yeah. We have had people in the past say, like, reviewing certain tracks, and they've said things like, "Oh, you can hear the slap bass," which that's incorrect too. I'd never slap. I've never done that. I only use a pick, and but yes, absolutely guilty as charged on the Primus influence for sure. Um, the Bungle, though, going back on that, I did get into Mr. Bungle heavily after people started pointing them out as like parallel, some influence there. I'm obsessed with like the album California now after the fact.
Yeah. And so in general then, whether for when you were starting the band and through the various different evolutions that you've had, what would you pick out as being some of the biggest sort of inspirations in terms of the way that you play and the kind of sound and the style?
On the bass, in initially in the beginning, I feel like, well, first off, I should say I was new to the bass generally. When Dumbwaiter began, I had basically abandoned being a guitar player and switched over to bass, and now that is basically home for me. But initially, I feel like I was trying to maybe rip off Juan Alderete from the Mars Volta. I was very, very into all the bass lines he was doing, and I'll admit I was looking at his pedal board and maybe using that as like a starting point for where to go with pedals. Um, and that's all fine and well. I think it took me a few years to basically realize that I need to do my own thing and find my own voice. And I think I feel like I'm finally getting there 10 years later.
I had what who did I paid attention a lot to Nick Reinhardt is a good example from Terra Melis, and I forget his other groups. I saw him perform in Death Grips somewhat recently, but I like seeing his progression because I feel like we've been on a similar progression where it's like almost guitar is like a MIDI controller and simultaneously going from like as much stuff as I can be doing to finding that one tone that really works. And that's been a huge inspiration for me for a long time. But I think Terra Mills is also on that list of I listen to them too much and can't do it anymore.
And we haven't yet spoken about your saxophone player, Tristan, because I wanted to mention as well how much I enjoy the saxophone, not just on the latest record, but through your other releases in general. I think that instrument adds a lot to your music. And like with the hi-hat, I am a sucker for saxophone playing in various different, whether it's the smoother sax or whether it's like sax in really extreme music. I think often it can add a lot. So it's not such a common instrument to have in a four-piece band. What was the sort of the background of the four of you getting together, and like, did you know that you wanted to be in a band that had a saxophone player? It was more like, we've got a friend that we want to make music with and he happens to play sax.
I was volunteering and working at a venue nonprofit space in Richmond uh, back in 2011 or so. Well, I was doing it before then, but I had booked Lightning Bolt, the band, the noise rock two piece, and I'm a huge fan of them, and I really wanted to play that show. And I had been playing in around the state for a long time at that point, and knew our drummer from other projects, and we got together and it was solely to be like we want to play with Lightning Bolt. And I think Nathaniel had the foresight to our drummer had the foresight to add these guys. For a second it was going to be a two-piece, and it wasn't really going to be like something that lived further than just like playing the show, maybe a little bit more than that. I will say that saxophone has gone he's gone through like a similar transformation with what I was talking about, where he's becoming more of a MIDI controller too. Like in the new record, there's definitely moments where you're like, that is saxophone, but a lot of it is more rhythm based, and a lot of it is uh, textural in ways that doesn't exactly sound like a saxophone.
Yeah. Something else that I noticed that popped up in the press release a few times is mention of the word pop. I noticed that several times. So I'm kind of interested how consciously you were guiding different tracks into catchy poppy territory, and if there were particular reference points that you had for that side of the music.
I have a newfound respect for pop because I had always thought easy stuff, no problem. Anybody can do it. Dumb waiter, we got it, no problem. And then it became really hard to execute instrumentally, but then also like relying on 5 words instead of a whole paragraph. You really have to be certain on what those couple words are and how they are said. And I didn't respect that the attention to detail that pop actually has and how difficult it can be. But when we were working with our PR agent, it was funny because we were talking about pop a lot, and she was like, "No, yeah, I don't think you guys are pop." And we had spent the whole writing process being like, "We're pop," but I think that's just coming from a instrumental craziness, Mr. Bungle adjacent thing, to where we're learning to hone things in, and to us, what we're doing because we've chopped off 30 different riffs is pop because it's simpler. But I agree, it's not exactly the same, but definitely inspired by and aimed towards pop.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are tracks I'd maybe particularly pull out. Which one was I thinking of? Like Scratchers, I think is quite catchy. And that's got like sort of a post-punk vibe to it. And I guess in a way, a lot of post-punk music is, yeah, poppy, depending on how we want to use that term, but certainly catchy. So I could sort of feel that element in the music. It is interesting that you say how challenging it was to come from a more sort of like honed, simplified poppy direction. And I wonder if there was an element of kind of feeling like because you had been playing uh instrumentally challenging music, there was an aspect that you felt like, well, we've got to do something that's challenging. Like if we're going to make things simple, it's still got to be hard in some way or other.
Yeah, definitely. It took a minute to be okay with playing one note and not being embarrassed by it. Feeling like the crowd's looking at me like, "Oh, he's not doing anything." Uh and uh and coming to terms with that and being okay with the fact that I'm only playing one note and I might not be shifting to anything else for a very long time, and that's okay because it's serving the greater purpose, which is serving the song. I think in the past we were just really bad about what do you call it, putting a limit to ourselves. I think we it was so no rules. It was just do whatever you feel, and no one would stop anyone else. Uh, and so there was no editing.
Yeah, it's like we're trying like a lot of it I feel like is like, look how good we are and like, can I teach you how to listen to music or something like, and that's why I'm really proud of what we're doing now. And that shift in my brain to how I view what we're doing is a big insight on like how why I really want to do something that was just emotional.
Yeah. I don't know. Something I was just thinking of just now as you're talking about sort of your like your feelings on stage and how people might be perceiving the performances. How familiar are you with the band Die Kreuzen?
Oh, I was just listening to them yesterday, actually.
Oh, cool.
Their first record. That's so funny. I think it's because I had just gotten an email from Touch and Go, and they're reissuing some of those De Croixin records, uh, and so that got me. I was like, that reminds me, I should go revisit that. So that's funny you bring them up.
Because I'm reading the oral history of them at the moment. Don't say please, and I've got to the point where they've just put out, or they're about to put out their second album. So they're sort of like going through a particular shift and transition and changing, and they're talking about how they went from having this very fast hardcore sound to slowing things down, becoming more kind of gothy, more post-punk, and
Sure.
talking about how for some people it's quite jarring to have such a change. And I'm wondering for you guys, now that you've got this new material, have you already had some shows playing new material, and how do you mix together the kind of the old and the new dumbwaiter?
We have been performing these songs at shows recently. I will say this though, we've abandoned the instrumental material entirely. So now when we play shows, it's strictly just the new stuff, and I don't think we intend to look back, and I don't believe the band intends on playing any of the older material anymore moving forward. It's kind of we're closing the door on that chapter and just looking ahead.
That's a pretty bold move. I guess,
Yeah, I think
if you have people that like they're like, oh, it's dumbwaiter, I know dumbwaiter, and they go and see them like, hang on a minute, I don't recognize any of the songs, and I don't recognize the style. And who the hell what the hell are these voices?
sure. Yeah, there is the worry that we might lose a few people along the way, but the hope is that they can change with us.
Yeah, interesting. So when do you remember the first performance that you had with the new material?
I believe it was in Richmond, maybe at the Cobra Cabana in Richmond, and we were basically just trying to test these songs to see how they would actually work in a live setting, not just in our rehearsal room. We wanted to see if these songs would translate well across an audience. And in fact, we did a run of shows up to New York City and back, testing these songs. And when we got back, I was upset because Nick basically was like, "We need to rewrite Bones," and I remember just being like, "Oh my god." I was just feeling like I had like gotten into the swing of that song, and he's like, "Let's destroy it and start over."
So how much did you play the material live before you actually went to record the songs?
I would say maybe if I had to guess, maybe 12 shows that we played before kind of figuring out what we wanted to do in the studio.
And how did the recording process compare to previous recordings in terms of the time and effort that it took to put everything together?
I personally think it was the quickest one we've ever made. I felt like we won the lottery, to be honest, because when you're in the studio, you're trying to capture lightning in a bottle, and you're not always going to succeed. But the reason I felt like we won the lottery with this recording was it went by so fast. Not because we were rushing, we were just getting very lucky and almost
We
nailing
were
the first
we were
takes.
prepared.
We were
Yeah, we were
prepared. We went
prepared.
in very prepared.
We don't always prepare when we go in there, and it's been so chaotic in there that you're like, oh shoot, what am I supposed to do here? Or maybe I'm off timing and never noticed it until I heard this. But this time we were like down to a T. Well, everything, this single thing was planned out. And for me, the recording process changed only in that, and then getting into vocals and being exposed to a room of people listening to just you, and having to get that out of your head and put yourself into like a character. Like you have to go outside and scream and then say something really dumb into the mic, and then like do a couple metal vocals and like just let yourself go. And I think that that was the biggest change for me, because it became less on execution and more on like, can I be this person? Can I like give the vibe that I want to give? That was the big difference for me.
Yeah, having to go through that process is really interesting for me because I've been making music on and off in various different forms for a while, and I do write lyrics and I do sing, but I've never got to a stage I've really felt satisfied with the way that I sing. And I feel the biggest problem I have that I'm still trying to figure out is kind of like the authentic emotion of performances. It's like I feel like I know some things about technique, but actually I'm getting annoyed by that because it's like I've
Uh,
got certain things. I'm just like, oh, I can do this from a technical point of view, but it's not really feeling emotionally authentic. So was there anything in particular or any kind of like breakthrough point? Like, you've sort of talked about specific things like going out and screaming, whatever, but did you have a sort of a turning point where you're just like, right, I've got it now?
I think part of coming the what allowed me to even consider trying to get into the right mood was being so prepared, and practicing over and over and over again and rewriting and writing and writing. Um, but then like I'm a big fan of like if you are meant to feel hurt, you got to kind of punch yourself a little bit, or if you are upset, maybe you need to spit into a couple times before you can get like that really nice rasp that you want to do. But it's become more of like a process to get in there. And now I'm still very much so trying to figure out how to do that every show. And especially with like hearing damage and you're putting in earplugs and stuff, and you're like, no, but I'm gonna go out there and give it like this pizzazz. It's pretty difficult. And I try to tap into exercise and like yelling and stuff.
Yeah. Something that we haven't talked about yet that I wanted to touch on was the visual side of the band. I think all of the covers that you've had are interesting and striking in different ways. And certainly for the forthcoming records, tell me a bit about the image, where it came from, yeah, how that came about for the latest record.
The Taylor White is the artist, and I've known of him for a very long time, and I help set up art fairs around the country, and I see his work represented here and there. And he happens to be from Richmond, and I think that him just knowing of us and being excited about it, um, and like I don't know, I feel like he's been paying attention to us for a while, and it was exciting because this pretty big artist, you hit him up and you're like, "Are you interested?" And he's like, "Not only am I interested, but like let's have a conversation. Here's like 1,000 different options," and just genuinely excited about it. And I think the band went through a bunch of the options before coming to the house, and it kind of felt like rerouting up the house, kind of walking away. but it felt nostalgic and like rerouting, and things were blurry and changing. So a lot of what we're trying to do is be on the nose more than we've ever been, and I felt like probably people won't feel that same way, but I feel like that image is very still on the nose of like changing and uprooting and everything.
I think it makes sense for sure. I mean, obviously, you've got the movement that fits a house. It's got your possessions, it's got your memories, it's got your life. So, yeah, it fits. I also like as well just kind of like the quality of the picture. Like it looks like something taken out of a like a Grimm's Brothers fairy tale book, which adds another interesting sort of otherworldly dimension to it.
We were I had a conversation with him where he was taking photos of the piece and we wanted to crop in on it, and I was like, I would like the wall as much as, because he paints on the wall and there's remnants of that everywhere. And we were talking about AI and how nice it is to give that feeling. And then if you get the record, the back of the record is just his blank wall with all the marks and everything on it. And just like the messier, the better, I think was our conversation.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Talking about the physical release of the album, so I noticed that you've got it coming out on vinyl and cassette. It's interesting the resurgence that cassettes have had. Have you? I hadn't actually paid attention to previous releases. Had you been putting stuff out on cassette before?
Yes. Yes, we've everything we've released has been on cassette. Starting with "Is This Chocolate" all the way up until now, every single release. Yep.
And how often have you had vinyl as well?
The vinyl began. We had we had done Audio Tree in Chicago, and performed songs from Cancel Christmas and basically an indie DIY label based out of the Chicago area. They were called Gigantic Noise. They offered to put out Cancel Christmas on vinyl. And so that was the very first record we had ever gotten on wax. Um, and then following that, we felt that I felt the need more than the rest of the band members that that at that point everything that we do should come out on vinyl as well. So since Cancel Christmas, we have self-released all the vinyl after Gigantic Noise put out that one record.
So, from a sort of like a logistical financial point of view, what do you have to put in place when it comes to a release? Like you have to basically have the money available. You're going to go to the
Yes.
pressing plant, get all the records, and then sell a certain amount and go like, right now we can start to like accrue some profit from it, and then save up the money again for the next release we're going to have, something
Yeah.
like that. All things being
Oh,
good.
absolutely. It feels very much like gambling. Uh, you're just investing. Like you nailed it. You invest money and then you get the product and hope that you can move it and it doesn't just sit in your home. Uh, but luckily, the wax, the vinyl does move, especially when we're gigging. That's probably where we sell the most records, is just at the merch table when we're playing shows.
And now that you are just playing the new dumbwaiter material, will you still sell copies of your previous records?
Absolutely. Luckily we have no copies of the last record. Gauss Gist did sell out, so that one's long gone. We do still have some copies of Tisk, Heck, and a few of Cancel Christmas. So yes, those are available
Collector's
for all the
items, never
instrument.
to be performed
Yeah,
again.
right. For the instrumental freaks out there.
I don't know if it's like, I don't, 10 years from now and somebody in Richmond's like, remember that Is This Chocolate album? And we really want you to go back and play it for us. Like, I don't know, maybe I could see it. And then we'll probably still have the vinyl. So we could sell it at that point.
That's good long-term
Uh,
thinking. And so, in terms of the promotion of the forthcoming records, what have you got lined up at the moment in terms of shows?
I think that so much energy has gone into this release that we haven't had the time to put into it. There's a lot of videos and stuff that are slowly going to be coming out. And I think also on my radar is like, I want it to kind of be out there to then book appropriately. Because right now you're like, just trust me, like it's a different thing. Like, we're looking for X, Y, and Z. And the bands that I feel like we relate to right now would be like, this doesn't really work, So
Good point.
I kind of want the stuff to be out, and then like we'll all hit it, booking a ton. Right now we only have the record release, and we'll probably set something up for the fall.
And you mentioned putting things out self-release, but this forthcoming record is actually on a label again, right? I forgot the name, but it's a name that I recognize.
Oh, Ossian Records.
That's the one.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's Ossian is us. We what had happened was
Ah,
Nick and I had started our. We were like, okay, well, if no one wants to put out our music, then we're going to be stubborn and we'll put it out ourselves. And so we came up with this with Juju was the name of our little DIY effort. And silly me, I didn't look out into the world to make sure it wasn't taken yet. And sure enough, there is a Juju Records that exists out there in the world, and they were established before we were doing our thing. So we realized while we weren't called Juju Records, we were just Juju. We felt like we needed to do a name change, and so we did shift over to Ossian. But that's still just it's still just Nick and I, pretty much. And when I do have a little extra money, which isn't often, I will try to put out stuff for other bands on the label. We've done the Bronzed Chorus is this really neat band based out of Durham, North Carolina. We put out their record. A couple of other ones that are basically friends in the similar situation where if no one's interested in putting out their music, but we think it's worth something and should be put out into the world, we'll try.
that's cool. Yeah, I like that. I've just realized as well, I was completely wrong. I didn't recognize the name Ossian. There was a metal
Okay.
band that I had saved in Bandcamp that's called Ossuary. And so like that
Mm.
name had just, I was just like, oh, I do know this. And they're like, no, hang on a minute, it's something completely unrelated. So fear not, I
I was
haven't
shocked.
actually found out another record label with the same name. So you mentioned some videos that are due to come out. I imagine that the two of you and maybe the band in general might have a similar attitude that I do towards social media of being a little bit kind of skeptical and just kind of like accepting that like, oh, I guess you kind of got to use Instagram, but I'm not a massive fan of it. But I believe you are on Instagram, you are on Facebook. In terms of people following the band, where would you like to guide them towards?
I would say Instagram is probably the best place to keep up with us, at least.
Who manages the Instagram account?
We're both
That
on.
would be Nick, yeah, both Nick and I. Yep.
Okay. Who enjoys it more?
Oh no. Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
So I started a TikTok for the
Okay.
band, and I started putting stuff on there. If you scroll on TikTok for like 30 seconds, you're just like, oh my God, this is terrible. It's like, it feels like a cancer. It's like so quick and crazy. And like there's AI morphed things everywhere. I don't, maybe you have to spend more time on it to hone it in. I'm sorry for this tangent, but I just am shocked that it's like such a big thing. And I go on there and I post and I get off. And
Yeah.
yeah, Instagram, I don't know. I don't know who likes it better.
Do you know what? I personally drew a line at TikTok, but I will say this. I believe, from what I've heard, that it's part of the reason why Crowbar had such a big
Yeah.
resurgence recently. So there's definitely something to it if you can manage to get in and get out without getting emotionally, mentally scarred.
We're trying.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm trying to put it on every platform and to just put it out there. And I think the only one that I actually interact with is Instagram. Everything else is just log in, log out.
Yeah.
Same here. I too draw the line at TikTok. I've never even ventured into that world. It reminds me of I feel like Carl Sagan was warning the planet about TikTok back in the 90s.
Mhm.
Very prophetic.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right. Keith, Nick, thank you so much for your time. It was great chatting with you. I really
Thanks,
enjoy
Tom.
the record. I think you've taken a bold move, and I hope that it gets the reception that it deserves. And I wonder, when you do get back into touring, do you think there's a possibility that you'll make it over to Europe at some point?
We had one festival offer in Bristol or something, and we weren't ready for it. I mean, hopefully, I plan on it, but
All right,
we'll
cool.
see.
I'll see how things pan out. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Until next time.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Tom.
All the
I
best.
appreciate
Stay
it.
well.